Last month I did a video where I unboxed the Steam Link, a micro console developed by Valve, basically designed for in-home Steam streaming so that you can play your computer games in the comfort of your living room. I promised a review of that system, and here is the first of a several-part video series going through my review of the system. So without further ado, let's just get started. First and foremost, I want to apologize ahead of time. The video quality at some points in the video is going to be a little wonky, and that's because I had to use my camera in the living room and shoot the TV. So I decided to use the camera that way instead of a capture device for two reasons. One, you don't really get a feel for what's going on because then it's the capture device and so forth, so on. And two, I don't have a capture device, so I think that's self-explanatory. Anyway, we'll jump right into it, and here we go. Let's just start talking about the system itself and how you set it up, and at the end I'll discuss what I thought of the actual setup process. I've got no intentions of boring you with another unboxing. Crack the bad boy out, and let's check out what's on the side and back. On the back you have the AC adapter, two USB ports, RJ45 network adapter, and an HDMI port. On the side you will have one more USB port. Once you get it out of the box, you can see that the system isn't very large at all. I mean, it's actually pretty tiny. It's on the scale of an SSD drive. I think I mentioned that in the unboxing video. For a frame of reference, you can see next to my cell phone, it's roughly the same size as my cell phone. I mean, it's, you know, there's a little bit of heft to it. There's a lot going on in here, and but yeah, it's a small system. Consequently, I think in the end, once you've got it in your home theater setup or whatever, in your AV equipment, it kind of blends in nicely. So it can kind of be fairly seamless in that regard. Like I said, the system overall, it feels solid. It feels sturdy. It feels like there's some quality to it, and I like that. For the most part, it looks really sleek, in my opinion. There's nothing marring the front face. There's not USB ports on the front, and I know from some point of view that's a bad thing because it does cut down on the types of controllers you're going to be able to use, but they do have the one on the side, so you could always use a controller that way. But as you'll see, there are other options. There are several ways to do wireless controllers, so that's not a problem. There's also USB ports on the back for those that are desperate for USB ports. Out of the box, initial setup is a breeze. You'll plug in the included HDMI cord. You'll follow that up with the included power cable. And it's recommended to use wired networking. If you're going to use that, you would plug in your RJ45 networking cord there. At this point, you need to plug in some kind of controller. I'll deal with the setup of controllers in just a moment or two, but it's not a hard process. It's actually really straightforward, and you won't have any problems whatsoever. If you're like me, you probably bought this as a bundle with the Steam controller. Out of the box, it really does cooperate very well with this controller, but I'll deal with that in a moment. At any rate, get your controller plugged in and get ready to jump into the setup process. Setup process here is super straightforward. You're just going to work your way through some screens. Choose a language, sync your controller, and then choose a wireless network. At this point, I want to make sure that you understand I'm using the wireless networking system as opposed to a wired network. Enter the password for your Wi-Fi, and it should connect. You'll then select your computer that uses Steam from a list of available PCs in your home. You'll allow the Steam Link to update the software and apply the update. And of course, a hard restart. Once it restarts, you'll be asked to resync the controller again, since the update probably erased that. Adjust your display setting. CEC is there and is enabled by default. CEC is what allows you to use universal remotes to pause video and things of that nature. You'll then have to go back to your computer and punch in the PIN number that the Steam Link provides. Assume this is there to prevent anyone from hijacking your computer with a neighboring Steam Link and Wi-Fi of some description. Once you enter the PIN number on your computer, you'll need to go back to the Steam Link, press OK, because it is prompting you to go back and install a driver on your computer so that it can send audio and video to the Steam Link from your computer. Once you finish the setup process, you can let it reboot, and you should be almost ready to go. Upon reboot, you'll be greeted with a firmware update screen. I recommend go ahead and doing the firmware update and allow it to go completely through the process. It can take quite a while, especially if you're using the Wi-Fi, but just let it finish, be patient, it will complete itself. At this point, you're pretty much capable of accessing your library and playing a game. I chose to do a few tweaks to my system. I actually ended up later going back and undoing some of these tweaks. But you're ready to play some games. Using this tile-based interface, you can select your game from a list of recently played, installed games, or you can just go to your game library list and install games onto your computer remotely using the Steam Link as kind of a control interface. I'm not going to go into any detail about how well or poorly the streaming worked at this point. For that, you're going to have to tune in to the next video, and I'll go into much more detail then. Psst, it worked pretty good. At this point, I want to address something, and it's kind of a hot topic for me and for some people. It's the PC versus console gamer debacle, right? This is not even a debate. It's a debacle, right? Because it's absurd. If you like to play games on whatever you want to play. But what the Steam Link does is it's bridging the gap between these two worlds. Consequently, it kind of addresses one of the big arguments that PC gamers always have. It's options. And one of the big ways we have options as PC gamers, or those that consider themselves PC gamers, is by way of what controller you use. So in this instance, Steam Link can work with a lot of different things, and actually on their website there is a solid list of things that are compatible with the Steam Link. Taking a quick look at the Steam website, you can see that of course the Steam controller is compatible with the Steam Link, the official Xbox One wired controller, an official Xbox 360 wired controller, a Xbox 360 wireless controller for Windows. You actually have to get the USB receiver to make that work. You can use the Logitech wireless gamepad F310 and a keyboard and mouse. And if you go on down the website, it explains how to pair the Steam Link with the Steam controller, but I'm going to explain that separately. That list is not exhaustive. If you check out some other websites, and I'll make sure to leave a link down in the description, you can see that there is a long list of controllers that can work. You might just have to be a little clever in how you make them work. But I'm going to explain a couple different options that I used to test out the Steam Link. Now, on a personal level, I don't care what you use. I don't care what you play your games on, and I don't care what you use to control your games. But I do like the fact that this thing is compatible with so many different options in terms of control schemes. It really opens up a world of different types of games you can play from the couch. If you're willing to experiment and maybe stretch yourself, or maybe jump out of a comfort zone you are in terms of your controller. That being said, I can already hear some people screaming at me, look, I don't want to use a mouse and keyboard in my living room, and that's fine. But there are companies that are releasing things that are kind of designed to be used in the living room as far as keyboards and mouses are concerned. If that's not for you, that's fine. There is plenty of options in terms of controllers for the Steam Link, as I've already noted, and there's a whole list of configurations that are available on the Steam Link and the Steam community database of people that have gone through and mapped controller schemes for your controller, so that you can play games that you've probably never considered playing in your living room. I changed shirts. Anyway, that all being said, let's talk about a couple different ways to set up some controllers. I've got a couple different wired options, and I also have wireless options. So let's begin with the beginning. So as far as basically just gamepads are concerned, I have 3 options available to me. I had others, but they didn't have like enough buttons. I have a 2-button like Nintendo clone USB controller, things like that, but it you know, it's not really ideal for this thing. But I tried to stay in the wheelhouse of, you know, twin sticks, things of that nature. So first thing, this was not mentioned on the website, or the official website, or on the other website actually, if I remember correctly. This is the Logitech F310. It's the wired version of the wireless gamepad they mentioned on the website. So this is the wired version. I tested it. It works fine. I'm going to show you how to set that one up. The next one I had, not mentioned on the official site, but it is mentioned on the Wikipedia site, or the wiki site. Sony PlayStation 3 controller. Worked fine, wired and wirelessly. So we'll discuss that in a moment. And of course, finally, as far as a gamepad is concerned, the Steam pad. So I've set these all up both wired and wirelessly. I've tried them all out, wired and wirelessly, and these 3 pads worked. They worked fine. Were they perfect? No, but I don't think there's anything such thing as a perfect gamepad. I also tried out the keyboard and the mouse, and we'll discuss how to set that up. It is not rocket science. First, let's talk about the Logitech F310. This is a piece of cake. To use the wired Logitech gamepad, all you got to do is find an available USB port. I chose the one on the side, and plug it in. You're good to go. Next up, using the PlayStation 3 controller wired. You're going to need to make sure that you've got a mini USB cable. You should have one. If you've got a PlayStation 3 controller, you should have one, because I believe one comes with it. And because that's how you charge it. So you'll need that, because that's how you get the wire. So there's that. To use the PlayStation 3 controller wired, plug your mini USB cable into the controller, and then find an open port. Once again, I chose the USB port on the side, and plug it in. Once you've done that, press the PS button and you're good to go. And finally, let's talk about the Steam controller. To use it wired, you'll also need a cable. I don't believe one is included with the controller, but all you need is a micro USB cable. And if you have an Android phone, you already have a cable like that laying around somewhere. That's basically the same cable. So you'll need that. In order to use it wired, plug in your micro USB cable into the top, find an open port. Once again, I chose that side port. Plug it in, and you're good to go. So wirelessly, the Sony PlayStation 3 controller, the Steam Link tends to treat this like a Xbox 360 controller. So from that standpoint, you'll have to kind of intuitively feel for where buttons are, because it'll say A, B, X, Y, and that'll be corresponding with the locations of A, B, X, and Y. So you'll kind of have to go on muscle memory, I think, but everything else is pretty identical. And it worked really well, but there's a little trick to make it work. Not a huge trick, it's really actually easy. Setting the PlayStation 3 controller to wireless is actually just like setting it to wired. As a matter of fact, if you do the wired process, you're already done. The Bluetooth in the PlayStation 3 controller syncs to the built-in Bluetooth on the Steam Link, and you can pretty much just unplug the cord, and you're there. So here's kind of a disclaimer here. Every time I use the PlayStation 3 controller wirelessly, I have to resync it to the Steam Link. That's not a big deal, but if it might be a bit of an inconvenience for you. If you don't want to deal with that, the permanent solution is, of course, the Steam controller. So the Steam controller is designed to work natively with your Steam Link, and yeah, it's pretty easy to set up, and I'll show you how to do that. So in my situation, I was already using the PlayStation 3 controller to play games, and I decided to add the Steam controller. So you're going to go into your settings and choose controller settings. Go down and choose add a Steam controller. This is going to basically sync it forever. You'll get an on-screen prompt telling you exactly what button combination to press. Press those combinations, and the Steam controller will sync to your Steam Link. So that's how it goes if you have a controller already plugged in and you want to add the Steam controller. Otherwise, if there's nothing plugged in, you'll probably see something a little more like this, and it's the same thing. You press the X button, you press the Steam logo in the middle, the center button, like all controllers have, and it'll sync. And that's it. If you want to, you saw a lot of little goodies and a lot of little configurations in the controller settings. There's things in there. You can go in there and you can adjust button mappings. You can enable like PlayStation. You saw on the list there's PlayStation 4 controller support. There's Xbox One controller support. So there's a lot of different ways to configure the controller inside the configuration, the setup, obviously, duh. But yeah, so you can do that totally. Anyway, the process is easy. It's just like anything else. So the nice thing is once the Steam Link is synced to the controller, or yeah, once the Steam Link is synced to the controller, you don't have to do that again unless you really, really want to. I don't know why you would want to. The only thing I can think of is included with the Steam controller, and I'll talk more about this with the Steam controller itself, is also a USB dongle. You can actually plug that into your Steam Link and sync it that way, but it's kind of dumb because you're wasting the port, and yeah, it just doesn't make sense because it just syncs natively. This is more used for computer support, for using it with your PC, your actual PC, and I guess from that standpoint you might want to sync and resync back and forth depending on how you use it. But that's the Steam controller. Alright, so the final thing I tried out was a good old-fashioned keyboard and a mouse, and this was really easy. It's going to be pretty obvious what to do. So yeah, this is obvious. I chose the two USB ports on the back of the Steam Link just because I like having these cables side by side. I plugged one cable into one USB port, and I plugged the other cable into the other USB port, and then I was done. Alright, so as far as everything was concerned, when I ended up using this thing, I actually had a tendency to fall back on the Steam controller, and I just fell back on that because it was easy. It was really plug and play mostly. It worked natively. And I'll go into more detail about that when I review the controller itself. But what was nice was at first, when we first got the system, we assumed that this was going to be it. We had this controller and that was that. But it was really nice to discover and to find out that we had options to play two-player games together. My wife and I played Brawlhalla the other night for quite a while. It's an arena fighter game similar to Smash Brothers. And it was nice because we could plug in the PlayStation 3 and we were both playing wirelessly from the couch. And it was also nice to know that hey, if we run out of batteries or these controllers die for whatever reason, we've got a wired option. I love having a wired backup plan because that way if something does happen, you can always plug something in, and usually that works more reliably than anything else. And of course, as a guy that's played PC games a good chunk of his life, it was nice to see that a keyboard and mouse worked. Of course they worked, and that was actually quite refreshing to me, and relieving in a lot of ways. Okay, so let's wrap this up. Hardware. From just purely aesthetic purposes and aesthetic reasons, just looking at the thing, it's sleek, it's small, it's discreet, and I like that. I can't complain anything about the look of it. There is one or a few minor complaints I have. It's one, there is no power button. I don't think I even mentioned that at the beginning of this, but there is no power button on this thing. Basically, once you plug it in, it's on. And then after that, it goes into sleep. You can turn it off, but you power it on via your controller or whatever controller you're using. That's not different from... well, it is different. I mean, there is a power button on like a PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, things like that. There is a power button on the actual console itself, so it is different. Even though you can power it up with the controller. So there's no power button, and that bugs me. Two, I would like to see a LED indicator, a power indicator light of some kind on the thing. This doesn't have that. I don't know that it's a necessity, and I think that's just a personal thing. I prefer having that. And I'm not sure why I prefer that, but there is something pleasing about looking across the room and seeing it's definitely on. I can go ahead and play games. It's a small thing from a hardware point of view. Another thing that bugs me, but I'm actually going to save that until the next video. And so in the next part, I'll explain something else hardware related that I'm less than thrilled about. That I think could have been worked out. Anyway, other than that, it's a simple device to use. There's 3 USB ports, HDMI port. You literally plug in 2 cables, 3 cables, if that. In my case, I plugged in the power cable and the HDMI cable, and I was good to go. So it's really easy. Really, honestly, as far as just plugging it in, turning it on, and getting ready to start, it's not that difficult. The setup process itself isn't too bad. You just work your way through some screens, and that's okay. I think that some people, novice users and people that aren't used to dealing with some aspects of computer gaming might shy away from this, and I think there's aspects of it that will scare them off. For instance, that driver install you have to come back to your computer to do to make sure that your computer can broadcast to your TV. That might be a little daunting to some people. It might creep people out. Like, what is this? Is this a virus? That my mom is one of those people that thinks everything that's installed on your computer is a virus. And so there's that. I mean. I don't think it's necessarily bad, and I think it's fine for people that are used to dealing with that kind of thing. But to a novice user, as I said, it might scare them off. And then the last thing to mention is the controller setup. It is not difficult to set up a controller, but once again, you might want to go to some websites and read some stuff, and not everybody wants to do that. Most people that are in This is kind of geared toward people that you do a lot more console gaming, I think, or people that are interested in bridging that gap. People that do the PC gaming, more often than not, are going to be okay with tinkering with some of these settings, digging in deep on some websites and finding the information it takes to do the tricks, like the PlayStation 3 controller. That's not on the Steam official website, but there's a way to make it work, so once again, we kind of lean back on that. It's not going to be bad for people that are established computer gamers that are used to having to tinker a little bit, but to a novice user, it might scare you off. That being said, simple solution is, of course, wired controllers out the gate work fine, And the Steam controller pretty much out the gate worked fine, and the directions are very clear on the website as to how to set that up. So that's not a problem. That's an easy solution to that. You don't have to use a PlayStation 3 controller. I just happen to have one. Anyway, that's it for the setup and the kind of the hardware discussion I wanted to have as far as this thing's concerned, or mostly. Next time around, I want to discuss what exactly does this thing do, and how does it work? Like, where are my games stored, and how well does it work? I mean, can I really play games in my living room? Am I better off with a wired connection, or will wireless work fine? I'll answer as many of those questions as I possibly can in the next part of this video. Until then, take it easy, and I'll see you next time.